Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Pinellas County's Business Hurricane Summit for 2021. We're glad you all could take the time out this morning to join us and learn a little bit more about changes that have occurred over the past year and just find new ways to help prepare your business for any potential storms in the future. First of all, I want to start with a few housekeeping items. The webinar is being recorded, and you'll be able to check it out later if you miss anything, so that'll be good, and it'll also give an opportunity for others to view the program later. The Q&A button at the bottom of your screen is active, and that's a way to anytime during this presentation to put in a question, and we have moderators checking that regularly, and they may answer those questions directly or bringing them up to one of the panelists later in the program. So that's your best way to ask a question, and if you have any confusion or concerns, and that's where to do that. The chat program is also active, so feel free to use that throughout. One thing we'll notice in the chat is when we mention links to other sites and materials and templates and all of that extra information, we will be recording the links to those sites there in the chat room. So you'll be able to follow up on that as well. Your microphone and your video of your own face will be muted throughout the program. You'll be able to see the panelists and the presentations, but your way of connecting with us is through the chat room and through the Q&A. With that, I want to introduce our panelists this morning. First off is Joe Borries, who's the operations chief in times of trouble here. He runs the Emergency Operations Center, and in normal times, he just helps in operations like this to prepare everybody for the storm. And so we're glad to have Joe on board today. He'll be able to answer all your questions of how we run things during the storm, especially. And he's got a lot of experience firsthand in storms around the state where he's gone to volunteer and help out with others through their storms. And of course, has been through Irma and other activities here within Pinellas County as well. Leroy Bridges is the VP of Digital and Communications for our Convention and Visitors Bureau, Visit St. Pete Clearwater. And he is in the Emergency Operations Center during the storm too, and he's been through red tide and Irma and the COVID-19 issue, so he's well familiar with disasters and helping our business community through those times. And thirdly, we have Ashley Tharp, who is a wonderful volunteer, private sector insurance expert, who helps us out in times like these to just help the business community understand the types of insurance that are available for flood issues in particular. She's also, because of that, a pretty good expert on the flood maps within Pinellas County and all of the distinctions of that. So we'll hear from Ashley a little later on. And finally, Brian Ellis is with the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council. He's the disaster recovery coordinator for that regional planning organization. And he does economic resiliency planning when it's not a storm, and also helps us to prepare for recovery post-storms. But during the storm itself, he's an active guy too, and has seen a lot of, be able to talk about the coordination that's necessary between the government, between the business community and private individuals, and then the governments and municipalities throughout the entire Tampa Bay area. So with that, I want to start out. We're going to be using a polling program throughout this presentation, and we want to check it out initially just to see who's out there and what kind of preparations you've already done. So we're going to pull up a poll now, and the first item, the first question on that is whether you know your own evacuation zone, and just choose one of these items as we. It's popped up on your screen now, but and we'll tell you the results. But first of all, we want to know, do you know your zone for just your home, for just your place of business, or for both, or neither? And so take a look at that, and we'll pull up the results as soon as we see the responses start to dwindle down there. And again, thank you for joining us today. This is a good opportunity in many ways for you to engage with us through the polling. And again, be sure to use the Q&A and the chat as you need to. Okay, Jessica, are we seeing the results yet? There we go. Here we go. The most of you know it for your place of business. What's nice, I mean, your personal home, but I'm glad to see that 60% of you know it for both. It is important to know your zone because, especially, as in this business summit, to know it for your place of business, so you can and let your employees know your zone for your place of business, so they know and can prepare accordingly when a storm comes. So again, thank you. 60% know both, 35% know your personal home, just 2% know only their place of business, and fortunately, only 3% don't know either. So thank you for preparing ahead of time. With that, we want to just introduce the concept of planning, and it is important to plan both for your personal evacuation and your family to take care of yourself and your own personal belongings, also taking care of your business. But then also we want to encourage you to think about your impact on the community and how you interact with the retail community and the clients out there who need your service or product during a storm and after a storm. So think about all aspects of that. And the goal is to just make sure your plan covers all of that, and you can interact with our community and help support it, and you know the community resources that are available to help you during a storm. So with that, let's take a look at our first video of the day. And the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council has put together a program called Phoenix 2.0. And they took a lot of footage directly from Mexico Beach, which was hit by a Category 5 storm a couple of years back. And this video in its entirety is available online, and we'll see that in the chat room shortly and how to get to that location. But we wanted to show you some of the impacts that occurred during that storm. So with that, we'll go to that video.
That was some terrifying moments to ride that storm out. I mean, this storm took our family business. It took both of my sons' homes. It took 75% of our community and destroyed all of the structures. No other city experienced anything like ours as far as devastation. It was a terrible, terrible sight. Remember, my home and all the landmarks that I'm accustomed to referring people to, Miss Sue's house with the blue roof, John's house with the birdhouse, they were all gone. There were no landmarks. I mean, this is our livelihood. This is how we make a living. This is what we do every day. We come to work. And Michael's got it strode all over the ground, and so there were some. I mean, those are tough feelings when you're in your 70s to see that. You've worked all your life for that. I was crying on other people's shoulders, just like they were crying on mine. I had some emotional issues that I just had to sort out. And I just had to sort of regroup. I had to pull back and I mean, when I say I withdrew, I did. I went literally either in my truck or in my bedroom or I had to gather my thoughts before I could even approach anybody. And I mean, even my sons. I mean, they were devastated. But the majority of the mom and pop business people, to me, they're the salt of the community. They're the backbone of a community. The people of this town are remarkable. We helped hunt for pictures or baby shoes or anything that people were trying to find. It just gave us a sense of togetherness that was sort of gave me some peace. Yeah, we lost a lot of things, but the best thing we can do is get busy, focus on putting our business back together, and that's exactly what we did. They gathered what they could, stored that away, and started making plans to get back to work.
Wow, it's just devastating to see the destruction that occurred there at Mexico Beach. And I think you'll notice from the video the differences between the building codes. The most recent buildings were still intact and the others were just completely gone. And so part of that preparation process is making sure you're following the latest building codes, make sure that your structures are adequate to handle the wind loads that occur during these major storms. The entire Phoenix video program was set up to help people to get a feel for what a Category 5 storm would look like. And they adapted some of the video findings from the Mexico Beach to this area and set up a storm scenario where a storm would hit in the Tarpon Springs area, thereby pushing a lot of water into Tampa Bay and generating, it's like the worst possible storm to hit the Tampa Bay area. And taking a look at that and allowing our municipal and county employees to work together on that scenario to prepare for a storm. So, you know, the biggest thing is to take a lesson from that and prepare for structurally for a storm. So be sure to retrofit your facilities as needed to prepare for that major hurricane eventuality. Also, I want to let you know that the link for that entire program is at TBRPC. Those are the initials for Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council.org/Phoenix, PHOENIX. And that'll get you to the entire series and allow you to go through that and prepare. Well, after the Hurricane Michael hit the Panhandle, many teams in Pinellas County responded to that area to help out in the times of crisis. And one of those is Joe Borys, our operations chief for our EOC. And we wanted to just have an opportunity to hear back from Joe about his firsthand experiences in that area. So I'll turn it over to you, Joe.
Thank you, Mike. And hello and welcome, everyone. So a team from what we call an incident management team from Pinellas County Emergency Management. We traveled to Bay County. We arrived Tuesday night, October 9th, right around 11 p.m., just as the first few drops of rain started to fall. We worked overnight into the day. But by lunchtime the next day, it was like someone was blasting water out of a fire hose at the doors of the EOC as Michael passed overhead. By late afternoon, we had lost all power and all communications, not just the community, but at the EOC as well. The rest of the story, as you've seen, was awful devastation. Much of Mexico Beach was washed away. And the cities, Panama City, Lynn Haven, Springfield, and Parker were heavily damaged. And that's not from storm surge, that was from wind. And I had seen the stories and the images previously, but to see it firsthand was pretty incredible. Gas station canopies that looked like they were picked up, crumpled, and then threw to the ground. Just incredible. So what was it like for businesses post impact like that? The debris blocked the roads, and the county had to shut off access for days until it was safe to travel. Bay County is a rural area, as you know, and it was heavily pine forest, big pine trees, 48 6-foot around pine trees that just were toppled over and snapped like toothpicks. Electrical power and water service were knocked out. Communication was out, and when it did get repaired, it got knocked out repeatedly by other infrastructure repairs that were going on, even some repairs that were miles away from the county. So it was a difficult time. We had some command posts come in that helped us with satellite communications in the EOC, but for the community, they didn't have any of that. They just had to wait for that infrastructure to be repaired, and for days, weeks. It took. It wasn't until we left that the water service, so 2 weeks later, it started to come back sporadically. For business owners, the first challenge was dealing with their own home damage. This is a very devastating storm, which just, as the gentleman alluded to, the first thing you wake up and look outside your home and you have all those damages. And then just getting to and dealing with your business then, that was difficult as well too, until the roads were clear. Then if there was damage to your business, the building debris was in the way with little help to clean it out. So you needed some heavy equipment, or, you just didn't have the tools or the manpower to help clean up. Contacting employees for handling their own devastating home damages and had their own transportation challenges was nearly impossible. Certainly business owners, employees needed time as well to comprehend what had happened, care for the injured and the traumatized. And it was a traumatic experience, and they are, big or small. When you're impacted, just as we saw with Etta, we had 8 businesses that were heavily impacted along the barrier islands. It's impactful when it's you. But going forward, as you start to recover, if you had no plans with your employees to report without an actual call, so if you can't call them and you didn't have a muster plan, they just didn't show up. Not to anybody's fault, but because they were dealing with their own issues at home and didn't know what to do. So that was a problem for a lot of folks. And it was even a problem for Bay County. But without power, many businesses struggle to repair their businesses, conduct sales, order new supplies, or let anyone know that they were open or closed, or so electrical dependent. And communications dependencies, and communications require electricity in many cases. Then there was competition for contractors to repair these buildings, navigating the permitting rules. Signs were, everybody wanted a new sign repair, or even temporary signs were needed and were in great demand and competition. I describe all this because it happened, it can happen again, but it doesn't take a Category 5 hurricane to disrupt your business. It doesn't take one landfalling here either. There can be supply chain disruptions that can leave businesses without materials or products. Hurricane Irma, when folks were evacuating and they say there was a gas shortage, there wasn't a gas shortage. There was a resupply shortage. Trucks couldn't keep up with the demand due to the traffic conditions. So we couldn't get supply in and out. A storm crossing over Miami, over Florida, heading into the Gulf near Biloxi can shut down gasoline production, including jet fuel, for days. So as those supplies dry up, that can be an issue. One of the odd supply issues post-Irma was pool screening. So many pool enclosures were damaged by the winds. It took almost a year for that supply to return to normal. So many folks waited to have their screens returned. As we saw with COVID, supplies for toilet paper, paper products, Clorox wipes, pork meat products can be disrupted by worker disruptions in states away from us. So I just mentioned that you can't just look locally. You need to look locally, but you also need to look globally as well too. Where your supplies come from, what is happening around the world or even the states that can affect your business, and have contingency plans for that as well. So hopefully this morning we can give you some tips to be prepared for the worst while hoping for the best. And as we go through this presentation, think all hazards. I say the hurricane planning should be seen as your gold standard of planning, as it'll help you with all the other hazards that you will need to plan for. So hopefully as we go through here again, you'll get some good tips and you can apply them to all the other hazards.
Right now, we want to go to our second poll, and this one has to do with the Alert Pinellas system, and we want to see how many of you are already signed up for Alert Pinellas in order to receive the notices that come out both before, during, and after the storm. This is our primary way of communicating to the business community and to individuals. So wanted to see how many of you have already signed up, or if you plan to register to sign up. And again, thank you all for joining us today. I want to again remind you of the ability to use that Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. That's your place to post any questions. And Stacy Swank and Jessica are on board to monitor those and let me know what those questions are. And we'll bring them up at the end of the program if they haven't already been answered by that team or during the presentation itself.
Hi, Mike. We have a good question that I'd like to escalate while we're doing the poll.
Sure.
And Stefan, thank you for this good question. He wants to know, how do you know if your building was built, like what your building code was when it was built? Does it go by year? Great question.
Yeah. No, it definitely does. The Florida Building Code gets changed on a regular basis. And so, yeah, you can check the historic codes using the internet, of course. But the important thing is to bring it up to the current Florida Building Code, which is, again, available on the internet. It's quite an extensive document. So what I'd recommend actually is to have a contractor come in and just do a review of your property. If it hasn't been built in the last 5 years or so, it doesn't hurt to go in and just have an analysis done of your structure to make sure that it's meeting all the current codes. You're not required to bring it up, but it's excellent advice, and it will certainly help with your insurance rate as well as we move forward.
Super. We have one additional, and I think Joe is going to take this one for us. It's a good question from Deb. And the question is, how many business properties can you register with Alert Pinellas?
So each user can register up to 5 locations on the Alert Pinellas system. So I've done my daughter's schools, I've done our location here, and I've done our homes and my mom's home, because if we do geo-targeted messaging, I want to know what those are. So yes, each person can do up to 5. So if you have more than 5, maybe a spouse will do the other set so that you're completely covered. But you need to remember that the Alert Pinellas, the great thing about it is that we can do geo-targeted messaging. So it's important to have those different locations in there and the type of messaging you would like to receive from us.
Great. Thank you very much. I'll turn it back over to Mike and we'll move forward with the program.
Sounds good. Have we got the poll results ready? There we go. Yes. All right. 77% of you already have registered with Alert Pinellas. Thank you for those who plan to. Those who don't plan to, it is a tremendous resource. I hope you'll reconsider, because it really is, as with the geo-targeting, things like tornadoes and summer thunderstorm activity that could get heavy wind gusts, you'll be notified of those as well. So it's a great safety measure. And after the storm, we found that text messages are the best way to communicate. They're the least likely to be impacted by the winds. So it's our best, and I just highly recommend signing up for that program. And you can do that at www.pinellascounty.org/Alert Pinellas. And that's all one word, Alert Pinellas. With that, I want to go back to Brian Ellis and his efforts at the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council as our disaster recovery coordinator to help plan for major disruptions to our economy caused by these events. And the key word there is resiliency, and he works day in and day out to help improve our resiliency, which is our ability to bounce back after these types of events. So Brian, take it away. Tell us more.
Sure, absolutely. And apologize to everyone for the technical difficulties, but let's talk about resiliency. So resiliency is the ability to recover following a disaster. How quickly a business can bounce back, get their doors open, and at the same time becoming better prepared for the future. So communities can become more resilient by practicing good disaster planning techniques in advance of disasters. Building new and retrofitting old infrastructures to higher standards that will be better able to deal with disasters is crucial. So improving when you can, and when you're creating new things in regards to your business, thinking about the future, being prepared, how to be more stronger for a future event. Resiliency means backing up critical data and information and having alternative arrangements in place to continue your business should you be faced with the unexpected. There are a lot of initiatives actually taking place throughout the Tampa Bay region. Just to think of a few, green infrastructure is being implemented throughout the country and in our region and Pinellas. Some components are designed specifically to target resiliency efforts. So to mitigate effects from extreme weather or climate change or flooding, whatever it may be. Some green infrastructure is designed to absorb water to reduce impacts to flooding. Resilient Tampa Bay transportation is a vulnerability analysis that identifies a way to develop future transportation while considering hazard mitigations to minimize extreme weather effects. So big infrastructure projects that are being planned out, laid out for the future, are considering what it would take to become more resilient, be stronger, up to better standards, so we're better prepared for the future. Pinellas County in 2020 created a sustainability and resiliency report, so that was a big milestone. And here at the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council, in 2018, we, the TBRPC, formed the Tampa Bay Regional Resiliency Coalition, comprised of 29 local governments and private sector members to address the future changes due to extreme weather and climate change. So that was a really cool initiative. It was the second one in the state, I think 18th in the nation, if I'm not mistaken, to form. And we work with local governments to identify ways to plan for the future. We also, that coalition is open to the private sector and really anyone who wants to be involved. So from getting information or steering us into the right direction, that's a big undertaking for us. It's definitely going to help shift our region to become more resilient. The coalition is currently developing a regional resiliency action plan to coordinate regional hazard mitigation and an action plan for local governments to follow as a resource. So not only is that group getting together and holding meetings, but they're actually trying to get some tangible results and bring it to the community. So there are initiatives that are taking place as we speak.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Brian. Wanted to take it forward now to talk about the role of businesses in preparing and responding to storm events. The critical businesses that we're concerned about at the Emergency Operations Center during a storm are the basic needs of life, of food, of medicine, of water supply, and in many cases for the building materials necessary to dry in your structure, whether it's a business or a home after the storm. So those are the primary businesses we try to keep tabs on and know who's open and who isn't, and how we can help to get those businesses open quickly. The other ones obviously are the hotel, motel, and restaurant, again, providing lodging and food supply to the local populace who've lost their homes, and then also to the workers who are coming in from other areas to help us to recover. And with that, I want to introduce again Leroy Bridges, who's the VP of Digital and Communications for our Visitors Bureau. And he's, again, has served in the storm. He knows what it's like, and he'll tell us more about how we make that information known to the business community and to the public. Leroy?
Certainly. Thank you, Mike, and good morning to everybody. I want to touch a little bit on what we've experienced very recently. And Joe mentioned this. Obviously, we're talking a lot about storms, but the reality is these emergencies can take all shapes and sizes. COVID-19 being one that obviously we're coming out of, and just wanted to touch on the effects of what the tourism industry has experienced during COVID and during 2020. And I think, when Brian talks about resiliency and the ability to bounce back, our region is showing that ability right now. But, last year in 2020, we compare tourism in 2020 versus 2019. This county lost more than $3 billion in economic impact because travel wasn't taking place, more than 30,000 jobs, and more than $100 million in local tax revenue to Pinellas County. And so that speaks to those emergencies taking all shapes and sizes, and for our businesses and business community to be prepared to pivot and to respond in different ways. And as we roll this forward into 2021 and being resilient, we're seeing a lot of positive signs of coming out of this. Our hotels have been running 90+% occupancy over the past month, and that shows the ability to bounce back as a region and as a local community. It's worth noting too, we're talking a lot about our obviously storms and emergencies impacting our area, but I think another important aspect to take a look at too are storms that are impacting the entire state, and that's a big piece that comes into play for our organization, is monitoring and managing lodging inventory, both for locals, residents to potentially evacuate to, but also for other areas of the state to evacuate to. So when we talk about evacuations and we look at evacuations, it's not necessarily just about our region and our area specifically, but it's about trying to help other areas of the state when they're impacted by a storm, or other portions of the country. Obviously, we're the #1 tourism destination on the Gulf of Mexico. And so there's a lot of people here at any given time. So if we have an evacuation situation, people are trying to get out of the area, but also we can be a very popular place for people to move to from other areas of the state. During that event, we do stand up a lodging availability portal. It normally lives at vspc.info. That's where you can access that during an emergency. If you went there right now, you'll see that's our hub for all things COVID, all things information related to coronavirus and information, regulations, restrictions that visitors and locals and industry need to know about what to expect and what our current situation is here locally, i.e. indoor mask mandate, have to be seated to be served at a restaurant, bar, that type of thing. In the event of a storm, we would point that URL to our lodging portal. We as an organization, both in the Emergency Operations Center and post-storm, work very closely with the hospitality community, calling all of our lodging partners to assess their damage and to get inventory, and also in most cases, very, very discounted rates in the event that they can help, again, with evacuations locally or with from other areas. Another piece to that whole program that I will mention is some federal funding for lodging and for evacuation purposes. If you're a hotelier and you're not already on the Emergency Lodging Assistance Program, we're going to drop that link in the chat as well. This is a program that's funded by FEMA, and the recommendation is to get signed up for that. Obviously, there's no current need, but when there is a need, our community, our Emergency Operations Center will make sure that those properties, those lodging partners who have opted in, are connected with the right people to serve as a place for those evacuees to go to. Important to note, this is not free out of the kindness of your heart. There is reimbursement as a part of this program, so it's really important for our local hotels to sign up and get registered for that in advance of a storm. Obviously, when an emergency happens, and again, I'm saying storm, but I know this was used during COVID-19 as well, this program. So it's kind of pick your choice in terms of when it could be used. I think another aspect when we look at obviously the tourism community and tourism business and businesses in general is making sure that we're not forgetting about your employees and your staff. When we look at, think back to Irma and that evacuation order, a lot of hotels, maybe they thought, let's hold on a little bit to the very end of it, but you got to keep in mind that your employees need time to prepare as well, and they may need to evacuate. And so building that plan and working around not just the guests on site and business, maybe what's best for the business bottom line, but also keeping in mind your employees so that you give them enough time to get home, help you close up shop, get home and take care of their needs. When we talk about communication with the visitors and with our local businesses, it's paramount for everybody to be on the same page. The Alert Pinellas has already been plugged a number of times and cannot recommend that enough. Some additional resources, obviously making sure that you're receiving Pinellas County communications is key. Alert Pinellas is great, but Pinellas County Emergency Management, Pinellas County Economic Development has a newsletter. We have a newsletter at Visit St. Pete Clearwater. Happy to share those links as well to get registered for those. Important to note, Economic Development and ourselves at Visit St. Pete Clearwater, we're not necessarily creating new information to share. We're dissemination, right? We're additional avenues to share that message from the county, whether that's evacuation orders, bridge. When will the bridges reopen? There was a lot of conversation about that during Irma. So it's important. We as a county are aligned on our communication. I would recommend subscribing to all of those different sources to make sure you're receiving the right information, as well as following social media for any of the organizations represented here.
Hey, Leroy, it's Stacy. Do you mind if I pop in with a few questions?
Sure.
Great. The first one was, how would they find the lodging? So if someone needed to find out which hotels were open after the storm, how would they find that?
Yeah, so while we're simultaneously promoting it heavily to our industry partners to gather and get that information, we are pushing that through every channel possible in coordination with the Emergency Operations Center, local media, social media. And so, yes, that's the main, on the one hand, you got to be able to get the information, and that's our organization tasked to go out and understand what kind of damage do you have, or what are the rates? Are you pet friendly? Are you going to welcome pets in? We aggregate all the information, and then we lean on, again, all the parties here, as well as our local media partners, TV, news, social media, to spread the word that if you're in need of a room, go to vspc.info to access the latest hotel lodging availability in Pinellas County.
Great, Leroy, thank you so much. That's very helpful. If they have pets, would they check the hotel's websites to see if they would accept pets?
Well, the lodging portal that we've built actually caters exactly to that. So depending on, especially, pre-storm, it's a little different. Post-storm, you could be talking about lodging partners who have some type of damage. So even in both scenarios, we're going to list whether they are welcoming pets, what kind of, again, post-storm may be more applicable, what kind of handicap accessibility do they have? Is it impacted by damage? Even things like may sound trivial. Is their pool open? What kind of services do they have on site still? So again, that's more of the post-event portal, but vspc.info, it's not just going to have the number of rooms available and the rate by night, but it's going to have all of the very specific details as far as amenities and whether pets, among other things, are welcome.
Great, thank you very much. That's it.
Great. And just a few items on businesses in general and preparing for the storm. I think it's important that you remember to take your records, the business financial records, records of your customers and your vendors. Make sure you've got them on a thumb drive or on a laptop or printed out or whatever. But you'll need that post-storm to be able to connect with both your customers and your supply chain, and then be able to provide the financial information you'll need for applications for loans and so on. So that's critical. The other thing to have on hand is tarps and plywood, the materials you'll need to cover leaks that may occur in your facility and to secure your facility. And finally, if you've feel like electric power is an important part of keeping your business operating, a generator is always a great idea. The other thing to keep in mind with generators is you need the fuel supply, and you'll need it for up to 10 days, as we've seen in past storms. So not many people can afford to put that much fuel on site and keep it in good shape. And you'll want to test your generator over time too, but develop a relationship with your fuel provider. It's tough. We noticed during Irma that if you don't already have a connection to someone at the port that's the major primary distributor for fuel, both gasoline and diesel, you have a hard time, because the folks that are their regular customers are going to get the limited supplies of fuel. So ahead of the storm, get a relationship with a local distributor of fuel and make sure that you are protected in the event of the storm, and that you can refuel about that 3-day level, which is usually when people are starting to run out. So keep that in mind. Another thing, just preparing for your risk, knowing what your risk is at your place of business. And the best way to do that is to insure against that risk once you find it. And with that, I want to introduce Ashley Tharp, who is our corporate training manager at Wright Flood, and again, an ambassador here at Pinellas County to help with technical assistance for all flood-related issues. And Ashley, tell us more about how to find your zone and how to insure.
Hi, so thank you so much for having me, and I am going to share this screen right here. There we go. All right, so we do have, Pinellas County has this wonderful website, and it is pinellascounty.org/flooding, and it's very simple to find, and it does give you a lot of information about your flood zone, your flood risk. One of the greatest links right here is your flood zone maps and locating all of that information. So when I go there, I like to use the all-in-one because I like all of my information, but if you want to use something a little bit more limited, you can just go right to the flood map as well. These are really helpful because they do give you a lot of different layers to look at and to see what it is that we're doing. So right now I only have the parcels selected for a particular area in Pinellas County. This is right off of 19. And I can add in some very important information, including our evacuation zones. So that's one of the first things that we do talk about. And it's really important that you do understand what your evacuation zones are. So that way it is there. And so that's one of the places to locate your various evacuation zones and knowing what that information is available to you. On that, we also do have our flood insurance, and that's my area of expertise, is the flood insurance. And so you can see here we're having it populated, all the areas that are in special flood hazard areas that would require flood insurance from a lender, or where the potential risks are located for flooding. And so obviously anything right along the coastlines or intercoastal areas, those are definitely going to be in special flood hazard areas. And so it's always a good idea to understand what these risks are when you're trying to travel, or when you're doing something in an area and there is a storm coming or there is an emergency happening. So after that, we do have some upcoming flood insurance rate map changes. So I want to add those in here. All right. And so these are, looks like they're populating right there. So in August 24th, we will have new flood maps being issued for the community of Pinellas County and all of the various communities within Pinellas County. This does mean a change to some properties where their risks are going to be increasing, and that could be a base flood elevation increasing, or it could be they used to not be required and be required now to purchase flood insurance. There are also some changes which are actually beneficial, and where the base flood or the risk is reducing. And so this could mean refunds if you do currently have flood insurance. So those are really important information to understand that these are changes that are coming. But one of the things I always like to explain when it comes to the preliminary maps that are out there that are going to be adopted August 24th is that this is actually today. There's an adoption period, and there's a period of time in which you have to go before those maps are actually effective. But prior to that, that is the most current accurate data that is available on flooding and flooding information at the time. So this information, if you are in a location that is now moving into a required flood insurance purchase, it's recommended you go ahead and purchase that flood insurance, because not only can you get it at a better rate at this particular point in time, but you also would qualify for discounts and grandfathering in the future. So we would really want to encourage that, especially if you are moving into a higher risk, because you actually do have that risk. Again, these are more information on here I do want to let you know about. Sometimes you might be required to have certain elevation certificate data. And this also does give you information on where elevation certificates were completed in the past. And if it was for your property and your insurance agent would need a copy, you can get a copy of that, which is fantastic as well. All right, so one of the final things I want to let you know about the website on Pinellas County is they do have a chat feature, which usually pops up for me. And they do have a chat feature where you can come in and you can ask questions and you can get some direct assistance as well. So this really is very helpful, very intuitive, friendly maps that will give you information that we've been talking about today, which is about protecting yourself, protecting your business, and protecting your employees.
Terrific. Thank you so much for the storm. It's not just for your flood insurance and your property insurance, but I would also recommend you talk to your insurance agent about business continuity and business interruption insurance for the business community, particularly for things like restaurants. It's amazing with the small margins that they have available to them. Losing that walk-in cooler and freezer full of food can be enough to put you out of business. So having the insurance available to cover those business losses can help you get through that storm and keep you operating, keep you available to help serve others, and to keep your livelihood intact. So keep that in mind and do check with your insurance agent. You can get varying levels of that according to what you can afford, but I do recommend you have some kind of continuity insurance. The other thing is, after a storm, the state sets up a bridge loan program that is designed to quickly provide you with funds, again, to just dry in and preserve your business, secure your business, and provide a little bit of funding until the FEMA funds or the Small Business Administration loans, disaster loans, become available. It's interest-free for the first time period, and that'll vary depending on the loan, but you'll want to pay that back immediately, because the interest rate skyrockets at the end of that period. So it really is designed strictly to help you get through a time period, and as soon as you get that FEMA money or SBA money, the first thing you want to do is pay back that loan and then use it for the other business needs. With that, I want to go back to Joe Borries, again, our Chief of Operations for the EOC, and have him talk a little bit about where we go from here and again, the planning process.
Great. Thank you, Mike. One just topic back on the loss of use for insurance is loss of use of your home. It doesn't come with flood or wind insurance. And we saw that with Edda for folks. So just take a look at that if you need a rider for that, because you have to be out of your home for a length of time for repairs. That could be a valuable piece to have. So another thing that's very important too is when we do order an evacuation, there is a start and end time to all evacuations. And the most important part is that end time to evacuations. And we have we've had calls previously from businesses and things like that. Yes, if you're in the evacuation order zone, we need you to evacuate. But also you're a community asset. So we really need you to, time that out just right. If you're a gas station, a food service, people are getting their supplies, obviously People wait till the last minute. We need you to be open so that folks can get the things that we need. But we also need you to be out of the evacuation zone by the time that the end time of that evacuation. Why is that? Well, that's when we, working with the National Hurricane Center, the National Weather Service, would determine the arrival of tropical storm force winds. And that's when things will deteriorate quickly right after that time period. So we really need everybody out by then. And obviously you need to have time to let your employees go home and prepare as well too. But we also need you to kind of stay open. So there's that balance of being open, being prepared, and being closed at the right time as well. Especially if you're a hotelier and things like that, and you have a lot of service folks that may be coming by bus. At some point, the drivers themselves need to get off the road. Besides, the bus is off the road because of the winds and they can be toppled over. So that's just some of your planning considerations, is the start and end time of evacuations. Stay open as long as you safely can, and then give folks time to get prepared themselves and get your business battened down and closed and to make it safe. So along those lines, there's 3 important pieces of planning that we like to use with everyone, businesses and folks as well too. Know your risk, make a plan, stay informed. And some of these things may have been mentioned already, but I'm going to run through them again. We want you to know your risk for a business owner, and you need to know and plan for your risk for your employees and for your businesses. Businesses have their own unique vulnerabilities, lots of windows, business equipment, supplies, electrical dependencies, those type of things that you need to prepare for and have battened down for the time when you evacuate, right? You need to know your evacuation zone, and we touched on that in a little bit. We have resources for that. You need to know if you're in a flood zone, high winds, it could be a dry storm. Irma was for sure, but those windows and things like that, they're vulnerable. The damage we saw in Panama, so Mexico Beach, storm surge washed everything away, and the 170-mile-an-hour winds, which were unabated because they were coming right off the Gulf. Panama City was all wind damage. And what that is, so the older buildings, buildings after 2000 have a little more strap down for the roof struts and things like that. Buildings older than 2000 might not have that. What happens is the roof rafters start to vibrate up and down, and that's what destroys the walls and things like that. So, high winds can cause damage and blow out windows, and tape doesn't work for windows. They need to be covered, right? You need to know if you're in the storm surge area, power outages can affect you. For Irma, again, a dry storm, but if we had had the 93% of the county was without power at the very start of that storm impacts, we'd still be in the EOC if we had that today without if the power just went out because of all the healthcare facilities and things like that, the people who are electrically dependent, it would be an emergency operation in itself. So being prepared for power outages. Water service disruptions. We know what happens when boil water notices are sent out and there's no infrastructure damage, a pipe is broken, but it disrupts, restaurants and other service providers like that as well too, cleaning services without clean, sanitized water. And the other important thing that we tell the condo association and businesses, there's no fire suppression sometimes if there is a water service disruption as well too. So, those are type of things that we just need you to know your risk and have a plan for. How would you address those? I touch on water spouts, for those on the Barrier Islands, once they hit land, they're tornadoes, so being prepared for that as well too. Don't take those lightly. They look really cool out in the water, but if they come on shore, they're just as deadly as well. Luckily, we're not in an area that has super ESF 3, 4, 5s, but we can have, ESF 1s as we saw in Pinellas Park just last year. And expect the unexpected when you're evaluating your risk. That's the best way to prepare. You want to prepare for the worst, hope for the best. And then as we touched on, make a plan, right? Have a plan. You still got to include COVID-19 in your plan, the importance of planning for that, with face coverings, hand sanitizer, things like that. For your to-go kits and for your employees and things like that, take the necessary precautions as a storm threatens, secure your building, cover and move equipment and furniture to a secured area, protect your data with backup files, make plans to work with limited cash post-event, and probably no water and sewer for at least, 7 days to a week. We're lucky that Duke provides for most of our power except the Knowlesmore area, but it still takes a while. And if you want to know a trick about knowing how long the power's out, it isn't just the distribution lines, it's the main transmission lines. If you hear those are out, it takes longer to repair the power. Contact your suppliers regarding your continuity plans, right? So an event's happening, you should have a checklist that says, I'm going to be doing these things at the 5-day to 3-day cone and right up to impact and evacuation, right? So having your checklist, you call your suppliers and things like that. Hey, here's my cell number. What's your cell? How do I get a hold of you? Have an emergency contingency plan and with contracts and backdoor numbers for contacting your suppliers and your emergency repair folks. If you don't have now, secure a recovery service provider. I mentioned covering to protect your windows and doors, clear your property and tie down any items that become flying debris or missiles. If you have fleet cars and equipment, you want to protect those, but you also want to top those off with fuel. You want to have that ahead of time because post-event, again, without the power, we might not be able to get to our fuel, right? Turn off electricity, water, and gas as you lock up your business and head out to evacuate. Offsite communication. So if you're like an Ace or another store like that, or have a sister store that's outside the disaster zone, you want to set up a communication relay with them so that maybe you could, if you're able to, you can get some communication or drive to them and have them reach out to your suppliers because they might have communications outside the disaster area, and then you would have that you wouldn't have inside the disaster area. And work with your employees. You have to care for your employees. Make sure that they have personal emergency plans and preparedness kits. And if you have a business that's in a non-evacuation area and you have a safe building, maybe that could be a host home. Maybe your folks could shelter there inside the business rather than if their home is on the Bear Islands or in a high-risk storm surge area. And always, prepare, plan, and practice your plan. That's the best way to make sure you implement a plan. And as we mentioned, stay informed for yourself and your business. Use only trusted sources of information. Alert Pinellas, Ready Pinellas, Twitter, local media. Those are things that are good for staying informed. A NOAA weather radio, age-old trusted technology, battery operated or hand crank. If everything goes out, the power's out, and we can't communicate, we still have 620, 970 that we could get to. They cooperate with us and we could get our messages out to them as well too. Where are pod sites out, where comfort stations are at, what's going on with the power and things like that. Again, pay attention to your evacuation start and end times. Which shelters are open and any special instructions. So, we don't open all shelters at all levels due to storm surge. So, paying attention for that. We don't want you to go to a shelter, but if you need to, we have those available. And of course, our Pinellas County website is a wealth of information at pinellascounty.org/emergency. We have a wealth of business information as well there too. And make sure you stay in contact, as I mentioned, with your registration companies and your pertinent suppliers as well. And then after the storm, if unfortunately you sustain damages, the Department of Economic Opportunity and Florida Division of Emergency Management has floridadisaster.biz, which you can go to even now and just register your business online. And should you have damages, they have a link there as well too to report your damages. Our Economic Development Department actually has a link to that as well too, pced.org/damage. And that helps if you all report your damages afterwards, because we look at residential damages for our individual assistance when we're working with FEMA. Commercial damages get reported up through the Department of Economic Development. And that will help you get the SBA loan process in there. And I think Mike mentioned the bridge loans and things like that as well too. But that's how that process works for commercial businesses. So I know that was a lot. Those are things to think about though, is to know your risk, make a plan, and stay informed. And with that, this year we want everyone to join our Pledge to Plan campaign. Every business should have a COOP plan. Everybody should have a personal plan. It's very important. That's all we're asking and what we're trying to talk about through this activity with you. It's not to say how bad things can be, but that with planning, these things can be overcome. We can be more resilient. We can cover faster, better, stronger. So we're challenging you to make a pledge, to start a plan, review, update your existing plan. You can go to pinellascounty.org/emergency to find the pledge logo and click on that link and make your commitment today. There's also templates to use in that section as well.
Awesome.
Joe,
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. Mike, I have a few questions. Would you mind if I jumped in?
Excellent. Yes, please do.
Great. Thanks, Joe. It's Stacy here. And our first question is, are businesses, are they allowed to evacuate later than everyone else? Do they have a later deadline, or is it the same for everyone? And does that include beach businesses too?
Great question. The answer is no. And it's not that, again, the evacuation ending time, we're waiting to the last National Weather Service Hurricane Center forecast, and we're looking at the arrival of tropical storm force winds. We don't cut it with a scalpel, we cut it with a chainsaw. So we're a little within a distance of that, but that's when things will deteriorate greatly. That's why that's the end of the evacuation period. And you should be at your safe location by then. And that's for everybody, businesses, people, us, our fire service, all that. Everybody's planning on that end time because that's when things will greatly deteriorate afterwards. Remember, I told you I went to Bay County and it was sprinkling. And, so really the end time of the evacuation was kind of 2 a.m., a little in the middle of the night, but things quickly deteriorated. That storm was gaining strength. Every inch it was traveling toward Bay County and Panama City. And it was all the way through to the very next day, right? It just got worse and worse and worse. So that's the type of effect. Take Eta when it came, right? So Eta was far offshore. We had some wind bands come through, and then all of a sudden, it tweaked a little bit to the right. There's some science that, but it came a little bit too closer to us, right? And pushed all that water up into us. We were expecting 4 to 5, we got 5 to 6. So, it's very important to know the end of the evacuation and those arrival of tropical storm force winds times. And that's what we provide. So no, it's not safe.
Great. Thanks, Joe. We have a few more questions if we have time. So the next one is during the last mandatory evacuation, this hotelier evacuated all of their guests, but none of the hotels in the immediate area were also evacuated. So were there any consequences for the hotels that did not evacuate their guests? Does mandatory mean mandatory?
Mandatory means mandatory, and it's for everybody. When we call an evacuation, it's for all of Pinellas County. It doesn't matter the municipality you're in unincorporated, it's for everybody. And again, we're evacuation for safety. So those folks, made a judgment that wasn't the best interest of themselves or their guests. We're doing this, based on life safety and what we're getting from the National Hurricane Center, which are the experts in this area of what's approaching our area. So, the consequences would have been life safety consequences. So why they got lucky that maybe nothing happened, it might not be the same thing if they had that behavior next time. And I know that our sheriff, he goes out and he tries to prompt people. The fire departments try to prompt people to get out and behave and obey the orders. They certainly can arrest. They don't want to do that. They're going to insist. A sad story, when I arrived at Bay County, one of the first things they wanted to give to me was, because we took over the AOC at that time, was a list of 200 names of people who've refused to leave Mexico Beach. Because at first it was, it's just a category 3. Oh, it's just this. Luckily, those people left. But I think you saw in the St. Pete Times, see how old I am, the Tampa Bay Times, the story that the mayor of Mexico Beach himself decided not to leave. And he tells in the story about how he rode out on the storm surge on a mattress with his elderly parents and floated out beyond his house. And all of a sudden the water dropped. So he got lucky. They had some abrasions and things like that, but they survived by the grace of God.
Thanks, Joe. So mandatory does mean mandatory, and the consequences are severe because this is life safety. Great. We have one more question. Is it possible for a business to obtain passes for a few key people to remain in a building during an evacuation to ensure equipment and processes can be maintained?
No. An evacuation order is to get out of that area because harm is coming your way. You need to have a process for shutting down that equipment safely, securing it, and leaving the area, and then coming back. Our job post-event is to get you back to your home, your businesses, as soon as possible, as soon as safe to do so. Our public works crews go out immediately when it's sunlight and safe to do, and start to clear the roads. You know, our law enforcement secure the county, make sure everybody stays out. They secure the barrier islands to keep gawkers, onlookers out. We try to secure everything as best as possible and clean up as quickly as possible so you can get back to your lives, get back to cleaning up and whatever you need to do post impact. But no, that's not safe to do. What if there was a failure? What if it was, you know, chemicals that they shouldn't be near that are breached or something like that? That's not the plan to have. The plan is to lock things down, batten it down, and get everybody to a safe location. Can't replace human life, can replace equipment.
Great. Thank you, Joe. That's it for questions right now. Thanks.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Joe. That's very helpful. And I think we just need to take it very seriously. There are non-evacuation zones in the county. That's why it's so important to know your zone. If you're in an evacuation area that's been ordered to evacuate, everybody needs to be out of there. It's dangerous to remain. So, and keep in mind that you can't get in and out of this county without crossing a body of water, especially in times of heavy rainfall. You're going to, you know, Keystone Road technically does, but it borders some very shallow lakes that could overflow quickly. So you're going to have to deal with water, and you just pay attention to those non-evacuation zones. In a evacuation zone E, we have 2 islands. You know, St. Petersburg is out there on its own in the event of a major storm surge. So keep that in mind and take it seriously. And with that, Joe, what does the outlook look like for this coming year as far as predictions of storms?
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Unfortunately, it looks to be another active year. But as we always like to say, it only takes one, but the prediction is another above average active season for us, or out, not for us, but out there in the Atlantic. So just be prepared. It only takes one. You know, hopefully they're all fish storms. You know, one interesting change because of the recent increase in activity is the World Meteorological Organization, which is in charge of hurricane names worldwide, announced that the Greek alphabet will no longer be used. You know, people were confused by alpha, beta, and things like that. And they felt that also that people weren't taking the storms seriously with those names as well. So the names will actually start over using common, the names are done regionally. So in the Pacific, they're regional names, and then regional to us here in the Atlantic Basin. And so the names will start over using common regional names in alpha order. Because we feel that, and that's why they started naming storms, is that the people will take it more seriously and personal, and that's what we need to do. And we need to remember, I know we've gone over a lot, and we just want you folks to know that you just need to remember, with preparation, there is hope, there is resiliency, and there is recovery. And we like to hear again from Mexico Beach, some real life lessons on hope and recovery.
When your time comes and you draw the short straw on a Category 5 storm, you need to be gone. You're going to be exposed to considerable damage or loss. Don't let that entrepreneurial spirit be a casualty of the hurricane.
My advice to every small business owner is have all your business documents somewhere that you can take with you. Have an exit plan of what you're going to do, how you're going to shut your business down to go through the storm.
Anyone in business, whether you're doing a restaurant, vacation rentals, or the boat charter captains, you have to find a way to be creative to do that. Kevin's doing sunset cruises instead of charter fishing things. If you're willing to adapt and learn that, post-disaster rules are different than they were before, you can make it. Everybody's resilient in their own way, but you gotta be willing to adapt and change.
You can download a loan document from the Small Business Administration now and have it so that when it's time, you fill it out and send it in. Make sure you've got plenty of insurance. Make sure you don't skimp on it. You've got to replace your business. You want to be covered.
Nobody who lives in the Gulf is going to be 100% safe from it at any time, ever. But if you have insurance, make sure your home is resilient in all the hurricane preparedness ways. Now I have hurricane windows as well as hurricane shutters. I have all the proper tie downs in my attic.
My youngest son, the owner of the business, he found some people to patch the roof. There was about 5 panels missing. All the big roll-up doors were blown out. Lee took the initiative to just frame those doors in, take an old door that we had in the warehouse and just put it in there like a storefront. We just were creative and innovative and found a way to take what we had, patch it up, and make the best of it.
1 year out, there was a lot of hope. It was a great celebration. Everybody got together and recognized, held hands, broke bread together, had drinks together. There was probably 3,000 people at this little get together. So that was very heartwarming. And I think there's plenty of hope for everybody post disaster.
Our regrowth has come further than I thought it would. We're just a small spot on the map. Our hearts are big. We're back up and we're fighting strong.
Wow. They've been through a lot, but it's encouraging that they're hanging in there and helping each other out as a community to recover. And that's what we need to do, both in the planning side and during and after any potential disaster. So do encourage you all to make those connections now and be aware of how you can help each other out. Work particularly with your employees and your customers and your vendors to have those relationships and supply chains in place before the storm. Want to close with one more poll. Well, we could potentially do 2 polls, but the business contingency plans, I want to put a poll up there to just let us know what you've included in your plans so far. And this one is multiple choice, so feel free to check as many boxes as apply here. And this will give us an idea of where we need to focus our efforts in getting the word out. So take a look at this, and again, check as many as are appropriate here. One other thing I want to mention about the video, one of the business owners talked about patching the roof and framing in the doorway where the roll-up doors were. That's the kind of thing you'll want to do to immediately to secure your business from thefts and from additional weather damage. But keep in mind that ultimately you're going to want to build back stronger than you had it before, and you'll need to use licensed contractors and do the appropriate building inspections just as you would before the storm. But secure your space first, but keep in mind that you're going to want to build back even stronger because storms are only likely to get worse as we go forward. That will take a look at the results. Thank you all for, it looks like many of you have included a lot of these items in your planning already. 68% have plans for their family and their evacuation. 50% have already planned for their employees. Appreciate that thoughtfulness. 71% have a checklist of what to do as the storm approaches. That is helpful because your mind isn't working right when you're in a stressful situation, and a checklist can help you make sure you cover everything. So I do encourage that. 68% have documentation of their property either photos or videos for insurance purposes. And that's the best way to get the most return out of your insurance policy, is to show exactly what it is that you lost. And then 60%, 66% are backing up their data. And again, that's irreplaceable too. And you really want to have an opportunity to keep that information, because you're going to need your financial information to respond to insurance claims and loan applications. And fortunately, only 13% of you really don't have a plan. That is a dangerous place to be. And we've got a few minutes left. I want to turn it over to Brian to tell a little bit about where they can go to find templates for business planning in case they haven't done it already. I don't know, Brian, are you still available, and can you unmute?
Okay, I appreciate that, Mike. Yep, once again, Brian Ellis, Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council. Some things that you can do to prepare for business continuity, I think, is a great resource. Joe mentioned it earlier, is floridadisaster.biz. There's a feature on this website that allows you to create or update your business continuity plan. So you can look objectively at your own business, how many employees, the type of operation it is, and you can put in all of the data. It's interactive, and it helps you build a tailored disaster plan suited for your business specifically. So if you were ever trying to get a business plan off the ground, you don't know where to start, it is the best resource that I have found. It's new. It's in a response to Hurricane Irma. That can really, really move that process along for your small business. So I think that would be a phenomenal resource to have. And I would like to mention that on top of building a plan and being prepared, if it hasn't been mentioned already, it's very important to review your insurance coverages on your businesses and your homes on an annual basis, just to understand exactly what you have. I think that's really worth bringing up. Another resource that I'm aware of is Pinellas County has a flood simulator tool that I've seen and played with, and you can input your address to your home or business, and it will give you a simulation on the level of flooding and that you could potentially be faced with for your specific address that you're inquiring about. So that's another good thing to kind of open your eyes up prior to hurricane season or just any time really.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And again, check the chat for some of these links that we've been mentioning, so you can see them in writing and help with that. One final poll we want to do at the end here to just see if you're making any plans for the future as a result of the time you spent with us today. Again, this is multiple choice, so feel free to check as many of these boxes as apply. Thank you again for spending the time with us today. I want to let you know that we will be sending out a reference guide to all the participants in today's seminar that'll have a link to the recorded seminar. We'll have information about the contact information for each of our panelists in case you have other questions later that you want to follow up on, and information on the links and the resources that are available. So that'll be coming out to you just by being a participant in today's event. Also wanted now is the time to any closing questions you may have for any of the panelists today. Use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and Stacy will bring those to our attention, and we'll be sure to get those questions answered as we can. Let's take a look at the polling results here. 56% plan to look up their evacuation zone, and that's always a good idea, even in case you think you know your zone, because it changes from year to year. So every year you want to take a look at that zone. 44% said they'll register for Alert Pinellas. Hopefully all the rest of you already are registered. 56% said encourage my employees to register for Alert Pinellas, and that's a good idea. It's a great way for them to know what's going on. And then 64% said they'll create and update their business continuity plan. So that's excellent. Appreciate your thoughtful preparation for the storm. And just checking, Stacy, do we have any other questions before we wrap up?
We're clear for questions right now, but if there are any more, please type them in and I'll be happy to read them out, but it looks like we might be ending right on time. Any more questions? Please put them in the Q&A. I don't see any more.
Well, terrific. Thank you all so much for spending the time with us this morning. And again, watch for that reference guide. Any further questions you have that you think of later, feel free to reach out to any of the panelists directly. Thank you again for your time today. Be safe.